I'm Chris Shandak. Today on CYInterview. CYInterview is glad to welcome back actress, author, comedian, and of course, the most famous Nellie Olson from Little House on the Prairie, Alison Arngrim. Thank you so much for joining us again on CYInterview. How are you? It's good to see you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm great. I'm pretending to be in Paris. I'm not there yet. I will be there in October, but there you are.
I'm guessing for the impressions of a prairie bee.
Well, yes, actually, I have new shows. I keep coming up with these things. Patrick, my partner who writes these things and produces it, it's like, well, I have a new show. I have the Mal au Trésor de Nellie Olson. He goes, so I have an idea. I was like, okay, we've done these two shows. We've just done them. If I had a third show, I'm like, you have a third show? I don't know. I have this crazy idea. I have a third show. So, yes, now Nellie Olson, Allumer les années 80. A whole Nellie Olson lights up the 80s. It's hysterical. And I just announced it actually this morning on Facebook that I will be there in October doing it.
Wow. Well said. And also here with us is CYInterview sponsor, the founder of Epic Financial Strategies, Rob Gill. Thank you so much for joining us as always on CYInterview.
Chris, thank you for having me. Super excited, Allison. There is something I want to share with you while we talk today that's going to be pretty cool. I'll be in France July 8th through the 11th.
Cool.
Yeah. I'll tell you more about it, though.
Okay, so let's just begin. I want to ask Allison one thing, and then I'm going to throw it to Rob. You know, Allison, this year in March of 2023, it was 40 years since the last episode of Little House on the Prairie. Are you surprised that it's still relevant 40 years later today, and why do you think it is?
It's bananas. Next year, 2024, 50th anniversary of the debut, a bazillion events all year long. It's going to be chaos. The whole cast is getting together and we're doing stuff.
Wow.
It's amazing. Oh, yeah, we're planning. There's a big event in March in Simi Valley. Walnut Grove, I think, is doing something in July. There's going to be just events throughout the year. And it's already starting. There's people going, can we do something in December? Can we beat them out? Like, okay. If you would ask any of us at the beginning of the show, are people going to be watching this in the 21st century and like obsessing about specific characters and totally being into it and crying at episodes? We just said, no. Michael Landon knew. Michael actually, he told Melissa Gilbert, he told Dean Butler, he said, they're going to be watching this long after we're all gone. They'll still be watching this. Everyone thought he was out of his mind, but he was right. I just think it's a very emotional show. It deals with the problems that real people actually deal with on a daily basis. They don't have any money and they have a lot of kids and live in a tiny place and are trying to get through the day. And I think this resonates with millions of people all over the world. And we had no idea how long this would last. It astounds us. But yes, we're all being asked constantly to come to do events and things. It's crazy.
Rob, what do you think about, like, she's a child star, and 40 years later, she's got a book. She does this one-woman show that makes fun of her life as a child star, but she's moved on and she's doing all these other purposeful things in life. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, I think it's called surviving success, innovation, and being able to really kind of give your message out. And her journey is her message, right? So you hear about child stars that don't make it. No different than maybe people that do good in business right away and can't survive it, or athletes that can't survive success. And I think that, I'm blown away as I sit here like, wow, 50 years from when it started. My question is, like, was there a time in like the early 2000s, 2010 when it made a resurgence, or was it always just constantly being out there on different channels? I'd like to dig into that. But when I think about what they've done and what she just shared, you think of a Fortune 500 company, a GE. You think of, Microsoft, companies that just, that are generational, and for whatever reason, the DNA of that team, however it played out, whoever the writers were and how the actors performed it, and I guess they seem to be very close. It's an incredible story that I think it could get a lot more momentum, and I had no idea until I started, when you told me about the interview and I started looking into it a little bit, that it had still been so present. I wasn't even really aware of that, and I think it's awesome. And it makes me want
Allison,
yeah, it's Allison. Crazy. It's
thoughts on Rob's response?
Absolutely, he's right. It's so rare. When we finished the show, like in the 80s, and I thought, okay, well, we're done. We're actors. We're like, we're going to go do another show. That was nice. And it kind of kept going, and there were the reruns. But in the 90s, I think what happened is in the 90s with cable and Nickelodeon and these kind of channels, they started rerunning it more. But there was no cable when we started. There were no DVDs. And then there was the VHS generation. And then those DVDs came out, and man, that was nuts. And I think what happened was I was doing a lot of appearances and interviews for things where I was on, I love the 70s and all these VH1, where are they now things. And I started getting recognized in the street with new haircut and things. I was getting recognized more in the late 90s than I was when I was on the show. And I was like, what is happening? And then it snowballed. And then young people, there's people watching it on their phone now. It's escalated. And then I went to France in 2002, and I was blown away. I'd gotten fan mail. I knew they watched it. I didn't know that the French were obsessed with Little House on the Prairie. And so that's why I got to come back here and do stuff. But it's just gotten bigger. And yeah, during the pandemic, you betcha, they figured out that Little House on the Prairie had an episode called Quarantine and an episode called Plague. And everyone who was stuck at home went, we could bake bread like Caroline Ingalls. We could survive. We'll watch Little House and we'll learn how to survive while cut off from everyone. And it just blew up. And then I started doing these readings on Facebook. I went, well, I need to entertain myself and everybody else is home. So I started doing live readings of the Little House books every day on Facebook, just to kind of keep everybody awake and myself. And that escalated into a thing. And now, of course, we're coming up on the 50th. It's bonkers. It is and we are weirdly close. People say, how many cast members of Little House do you have on speed dial? I think it's 14. We do. We talk to each other all the time. And then as the 50th is coming, we're having planning meetings. It's very unusual. Most casts of television shows are not friends this many years later. We have a really high number of child stars who went on to do really well in their lives and really complete functional lives from Little House. So we're very proud of that. It is. It's like the kid athletes. It's like, what do you do when you're like a skater or a gymnast? It's really hard to go on to the next thing. And it's enormous pressure being in show business, even for an adult, to handle that level of pressure and fame and craziness. But for a kid at 9, 10, 11 years old, it is difficult. It's your formative years, and you're in what is not really a natural environment. I was very lucky. Cast a Little House, the crew very kind to me, and we actually did do that 3-hour school thing, and I was forced to actually stay in school and learn to read and write, so that was helpful. But yeah, it's very difficult to be a young person and be doing something that intense with your day-to-day life, and then go, well, now what? It's a lot of work.
Rob, I know that you were taking a lot in there, so is there anything you'd like to ask Alison follow?
Yeah, well, to me, I like to study excellence, right? And systems and processes and standard operating procedures. And I'm going to just say to myself, okay, Little House on the Prairie had X amount of young actors and actresses that, lived a fulfilling life. What was going on in the world of Different Strokes, right? What was happening there versus, I want to know the dynamic of the leadership at Little House on the Prairie for these kids that wasn't present in these other kind of shows.
Boom, 2 words, Michael Landon. Yeah, because we saw this a lot, and I knew the people from they were an NBC show. We'd see them at events, and even at the time, we're like, whoa, what's happening over there? The stories that have come out of just the complete lack of control, discipline, or anything on the set. Todd Bridges is doing well now. But he's talked about it was just a free for all, and I remember thinking we couldn't do that on the show. We were treated with a level of respect. We were held to a certain standard. We were expected to work like adults, even though we were kids. And Michael had a great sense of humor, and he loved playing with the kids. But it was also and now it's time to work. And you were supposed to hit your mark and know your lines and put in a real performance. If you just showed up more like, hi, I'm a kid, I'm going to just this is my act, I'm going to make goofy faces, I have no character, but yeah, we don't need you on the show anymore. It was I tell a story in my book about one of the assistant directors was handing out gum and candy to some of the kids, the atmosphere kids, towards the end of the day. Hey, if you're good, get gum. And I couldn't chew gum, I had braces, so what did I care? And Michael made him stop. And he told him, I don't want you giving them gum and candy at the end of the day. He says, first of all, they're working here. Their motivation is they're getting a paycheck. He said, but secondly, they're not trained animals. They're not little dogs. We're not going with the hot dog here.
Yep.
These are human beings. They're actors, and I want them treated with dignity. And, it shouldn't be, oh, you're getting a little reward for being good. It's like, this is your job, and either you want to do it or you don't.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm being treated with respect at 12? No, wait, that can't be it was kind of incredible.
My quick question, Chris, before we move on is,
Go ahead, sure.
when you were auditioning, what was that like, and how did you even get into the audition?
Oh, that was great. I'd started working when I was, 5. My Screen Actors Guild card says member since 1967.
Wow.
Yeah, I was doing commercials and TV show stuff as a little tiny child. I did a movie when I was 10. I actually wasn't working much at 11, and my father, who's a manager, sat me down and said, many child actors don't work until after they grow up or ever again, and told me I might be washed up at 11. And so technically Little House was the comeback. I mean, I'm on my 87th comeback. Little House was the comeback role. I'd already stopped. I read for the part of Laura. I had an agent. I went to all the auditions. But I read for the part of Laura. I read for the part of Mary. Then they made the pilot, and I just kind of went, I moved on. And then they called me back to read for this other part of this Nellie Olson and I knew nothing. I hadn't read the books. Terrible, I know. And I got the pages, and I turned to my father and said, "This girl is awful. She's a bitch." And he said, "What are you talking about?" And then I read it for him. My father starts laughing hysterically. He's like, "Okay, don't touch it. Don't do anything. Don't change it. Don't even look at the pages. Don't rehearse it. Just please go in and do it exactly like that." And I did. And Michael Landon and the other producers were laughing hysterically. And they said, "Could you do it again?" And I said, "Oh, yes. What would you like me to change?" And they said, "Nothing. Just do the thing about the house again." They were dying. And it was the My Home speech, where she brags about how much everything in her house costs. And it was just really, really funny. It was funny. And I got it that it was funny. And I was hired on the spot.
So, Chris, I'm having fun here. Let me just ask one more question, because Alison had mentioned she was recognized more in the late 90s than the mid to late 80s. So when people recognized you as a 10-year older person, were they still mad at you being Nellie?
They're still mad now. I'm 61 years old. I don't want people coming up to me who are still pissed about things I did while pretending to be someone else when I was 11. There's a people like, how did I did that episode? The episode with the stuttering goes, it made me so mad. I'm like, it's okay. It's been 50 years. I think she's okay. She lives in Florida. We're still friends. She's an actress. It's fun.
Sorry, Chris.
No problem. One thing I want to get into here on away from the show business and the acting is Alison does something very serious as the president of the National Association to Protect Children at protect.org. Would you tell us a little bit about that, Alison?
Yeah, we back in the early 2000s, a group of people who had been working in various fields of child abuse, attorneys. There was a guy who was an attorney general. There was various people, a couple of cops, people who've been working for their fields. And they said, okay, we've got the guy. And, sadly, often someone known to the child, a family member, the swim coach, whatever. We've got the guy, and we've got him arrested, and we've got all the way to trial, and we've even got the kid has testified and everything. He's been found guilty. We've done it. We're done. This is great. He's found guilty. And then they let him go, and he took the child home with him. What are we all doing wrong here? We just did it. The psychiatrist and the lawyers and the prosecutor did. We all did our little jobs, and now somehow this man is home and the child is living with him. Wait. And what they found out is that in many states, and still many states today, although we knocked out a few, there is a thing called the incest exception. I know. It's like, what? Where if, say, the sexual abuse of a child is 20 years, say, in that state, but if you are related to the child in any way, or one California had, or living with the child like a family, borders, I guess we're okay, you could apply to have your record expunged, serve no jail time, etc., and walk, basically, with full probation, zero time served. And then since it was the child's home, unless there was a separate hearing about having you not live there, you went home with the victim.
Wow.
And this happened all the time, thousands and thousands. And it didn't go well. It didn't go well. They either re-offended with that kid or their younger sibling. It was bad.
So what are you doing today now to rectify that?
Well, we've changed that law in 7 or 8 states, knocked it right out. California and New York were the most egregious, and we nailed that business.
Thank God.
So we changed that. On the federal level, one of the things, there's the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. Each police department has an ICAC team, as they call them, and these are the computer forensic trained people. They find the child sexual abuse images, the child pornography, the traffickers via the internet, and arrest them. And they were kind of outmanned and not funded that well, and we went on the federal level and said, no, you need to fund them. They need to have more people. They need to have more software, and we helped get them through the Weiss Center for Child Rescue Technology that we created, whatever they needed, computer-wise, manpower. We started the HERO program. We got them manpower. We got them more funding. We got them like everything, and it has resulted in a giant increase in arrests and convictions.
Thank you.
Well, that's phenomenal. I appreciate the good work you do. Aside from obviously making us laugh, you do some very serious and important stuff in the world, and we really appreciate that. Protect.org, people should go there to learn more about what Alison and her colleagues do at that organization. So let's end with a laugh, because I got a few minutes left, and I think about this from the first interview, the first CY interview we had with you back in 2017. As an 8-year-old, tell me what you knew about Liberace and your father, Liberace.
So my family were all in show business. My mother did the cartoons. My mother was Casper. My dad was a manager, and he wasn't like just a momager or a dadager, like because I was working. He was a manager long before I did. He worked for everybody, and he worked at Seymour Heller and Associates. My father worked for Liberace. So he was managing Liberace. So I would go to Liberace shows as a child. And my parents said, now you have to be good, because don't say anything, because no one must know that Liberace is gay. I said, I'm sorry, I'm 8. I know he's gay. I said, the man just literally flew over the stage. And they said, no. But he had these fans, and it was really crazy. It was like, I guess, the Claymates. They loved him. They did not care. They totally knew. They totally knew. They were like, oh, yes, you'd be safe with him. Oh. They did not care. They worshipped him. They didn't care if he was gay, straight, or from the planet Venus. They did not care. But poor Liberace, he was like, no, they mustn't know. They mustn't know. And I'm like 8 going, really?
In this last 90-second drop, final question for Alison.
Yeah. So Alison, I'm in the financial planning space.
Excellent.
I'm also I started a AAU basketball program, and locally here in New Jersey, and a couple of high power athletes kind of came in and really kind of taken it to the next level. But one story within that story is that we've connected with the leading AAU program in France. And so there's like 440 kids that are part of this program, basketball specific. And we're also building out a financial literacy course, mental health that's tied into surviving success and money, and teaching all kids on how to create their own brand and their own business. I have a social media presence that ties into what I do, and we just want to be able to share and educate these kids. But I am going to be in France on the 8th and to the 11th in July. The Olympics are going to be there a year later, as you may be aware, and we're going to have our Epic Elite AAU program that's going to be part of that, as well as our sports agency company. So,
Nice. I may hook you up with my buddy Patrick, because he's also, in addition to all the stuff he does, he is a teacher. He coaches chess teams, youth chess.
Wow.
And he did a whole program during the pandemic with kids, writing and interviewing celebrities during the pandemic about what they were doing. He did a whole program about getting kids to not smoke, which in France, not smoke. He's a very cool guy. You should talk.
I would love to talk to him. And Chris, before we go, when you perform in France, are you going to be in Paris, or are you going to be all over the place?
Nearby, I'm all over the place. I actually on Instagram and Facebook, I posted the list of towns and the map. Like, because I had to put a map of France with all the cities.
Awesome. I'd love to have
Alison, it's always a joy having you on CYInterview. Rob, as always, thank you as always for being here. So for actress Alison Arngrim and the founder of Epic Financial Strategies LLC and CYInterview sponsor Rob Gill, I'm Chris Shandick. Thank you both for being on CYInterview today.